He never thought a boring work conference would turn his entire life upside down, but that's exactly what happened on a cold Friday evening in November. David was 34 years old and worked as a marketing consultant for a decent-sized company. His life had become predictable, maybe even a little dull. Wake up, go to work, come home, watch some TV, and repeat. After his divorce 2 years ago, he'd built walls around himself. High walls, the kind that kept everyone at a comfortable distance. When his boss told him about the mandatory weekend retreat at some fancy hotel, David groaned inside. 2 whole days of forced fun, fake smiles, and team-building exercises that nobody actually enjoyed. But he had no choice. Everyone had to attend. The hotel was nice enough. One of those places with too many mirrors and marble floors that made your footsteps echo. David checked into his room, unpacked his overnight bag, and headed down to the conference hall. The usual scene greeted him. Co-workers standing in small groups, clutching drinks, making small talk about nothing important. He grabbed a coffee from the refreshment table and found a quiet corner. That's when he saw her. She was standing near the window talking to a group of executives. Her laugh carried across the room, genuine and unforced. She had this energy about her, like she was fully present in a room full of people just going through the motions. David had heard about her. The new regional director. People said she was brilliant, tough, and didn't play by the old rules. Their eyes met for just a second across the crowded room. She smiled slightly, then turned back to her conversation. David felt something stir in his chest, something he hadn't felt in a long time. He quickly looked away, reminding himself that work conferences were not the place for whatever that feeling was. The evening program started with the usual speeches. The CEO talked about company values and growth targets. Then came the dreaded part, the team-building exercises. Everyone was asked to pair up with someone they didn't know well for a trust-building conversation. David's heart sank. He hated these things. "Looks like we're partners," a voice said beside him. He turned, and there she was. Up close, she was even more striking. Not just beautiful, but alive in a way that made everyone else seem half asleep. "I'm David," he said, trying to sound casual. "I know. I've seen your presentations. You're actually good at what you do." She smiled that smile again. "I'm Rebecca." They found 2 chairs away from the noise and sat down. The exercise was simple. Ask each other personal questions, listen without judgment, and share something real. David prepared his usual safe answers, the ones that revealed nothing. But Rebecca didn't ask safe questions. "When was the last time you did something that actually scared you?" she asked, looking directly into his eyes. David blinked. What kind of scared?" "Any kind." "The good kind. The kind that makes you feel alive." He thought about it. Really thought about it. "Honestly, I can't remember. Maybe years ago." Rebecca nodded slowly. "Yeah, me too. I moved across the country for this job, and everyone said I was brave." "But you want to know the truth?" "I did it because staying where I was felt like dying slowly." Her honesty caught him off guard. People didn't talk like this at work conferences. They talked about quarterly reports and weekend plans and the weather. "Why are you telling me this?" David asked. "Because I'm tired," she said simply. "Tired of pretending. Tired of surface-level conversations where nobody says what they actually mean. Tired of playing it safe." She leaned back in her chair. "Aren't you tired too?" David felt something crack inside him. "Yeah, I am." They talked for the rest of the exercise, real talk. About disappointments and dreams and the gap between who they were and who they thought they'd become. When the moderator announced that dinner was being served in the banquet hall, neither of them moved. "Do you actually want to sit through a 3-course meal of rubber chicken and corporate speeches?" Rebecca asked. "Not even a little bit," David admitted. "There's a diner about 2 blocks from here. Real food. No name tags required." She stood up, grabbing her coat. "Come on." David hesitated for exactly 3 seconds. Then he grabbed his jacket and followed her out. The diner was the complete opposite of the fancy hotel. Cracked vinyl booths, fluorescent lights, and a waitress who called everyone honey. It was perfect. They ordered burgers and fries and coffee that actually tasted like coffee. The conversation flowed like they'd known each other for years instead of hours. Rebecca told him about growing up in a small town where everyone knew everyone's business, about her failed engagement 5 years ago, about feeling like she was always chasing something just out of reach. David found himself opening up in ways he hadn't in years. He told her about his divorce, about how he'd let his life become small and safe. about waking up some mornings and barely recognizing himself. "You know what your problem is?" Rebecca said, pointing a French fry at him. "You're afraid of wanting things." "That's not true," David protested. "Really? Name one thing you want." "Really want, not should want or used to want. Actually want right now." David opened his mouth, then closed it. He couldn't think of a single thing. Rebecca smiled, but it was a gentle smile. "See? You've gotten so good at not wanting anything that you've forgotten how." They stayed at that diner for hours. The waitress refilled their coffee cups 4 times. Other customers came and went. Outside the window, the November sky grew dark and heavy with clouds. When they finally left, it was past 10 o'clock. The sidewalk was cold, and their breath came out in little clouds. They walked slowly back toward the hotel, neither wanting the evening to end. That's when it started raining. Not a gentle rain, but a sudden downpour that soaked them in seconds. "Run!" Rebecca laughed, and they sprinted toward the hotel entrance. They burst into the lobby, dripping wet and laughing like teenagers. David reached for his key card to head upstairs and change, but when he swiped it at his door, the light flashed red. He tried again. Red light. The stupid card had stopped working. "Front desk is closed until morning," Rebecca said, wringing water from her hair. "Budget cuts. Come on, you can dry off in my room." David's heart started beating faster, but he followed her down the hallway. Her room was identical to his. Same bland artwork on the walls, same generic furniture, but somehow it felt different. Rebecca handed him a towel and disappeared into the bathroom, coming back in dry clothes. "I'll turn around while you change into something dry," she said. "There's a hotel robe in the closet." When they were both dry, they sat on opposite ends of the small couch by the window. The rain drummed against the glass. The city lights blurred and shimmered through the water. "This is nice," David said quietly. "Just this being here, talking to someone who doesn't feel like a stranger." Rebecca looked at him for a long moment. Then she stood up and walked to the window. She reached up and slowly closed the curtains, blocking out the city lights and rain. She turned to face him, and there was that smile again. But this time it was different. This time it held a question, a challenge, a promise of something that might be wonderful or might be a complete disaster. "So," Rebecca said softly, "are we going to keep pretending this is just a friendly conversation between co-workers?" David's breath caught in his throat. Every careful, cautious part of him screamed to make an excuse and leave. To keep his life simple and safe and predictable, but looking at her standing there, with that smile that promised everything his careful life had been missing, David realized something. He was so tired of being careful. The rain continued to fall outside. Inside that hotel room, something was beginning. Something that would change everything. David stood up slowly, his heart pounding so loud he was sure she could hear it. And for the first time in years, he chose not to walk away. What started that rainy night didn't end when morning came. It became something David couldn't quite name, something that lived in the spaces between his regular life. They agreed from the beginning to keep it quiet. The company had strict rules about relationships between employees, especially when one person had any kind of authority over the other. Rebecca was a director. David was a consultant. On paper, they didn't even work in the same department. But still, they both knew the risks. "Let's just see where this goes," Rebecca had said that first morning, sitting across from him at breakfast in the hotel restaurant. "No pressure, no labels. Just us." David had nodded, thinking he could handle that, thinking it would be simple. It wasn't simple. The first few weeks felt like living in a dream he didn't want to wake up from. They'd meet for coffee before work, at a place 3 blocks from the office where no co-workers ever went. They'd text throughout the day, little messages that made him smile at his desk. And on weekends, they'd drive to the next town over, to restaurants and parks where nobody knew them. One Saturday, they drove 2 hours to the coast. The beach was nearly empty in the cold weather. They walked along the shore, shoes in hand, the wind whipping their hair. Rebecca found a perfect shell and handed it to him like it was treasure. "I haven't done this in years," she said, laughing as a wave nearly caught her feet. "Just gone somewhere for no reason. Just because." David put the shell in his pocket. He still had it even now. Those early days felt stolen, precious. Every moment together was a secret they shared, and somehow that made it more intense. The thrill of walking into the office and catching her eye across a meeting room. The rush of staying late, waiting until everyone else left. then talking in the empty parking garage until midnight. But secrets have weight. And this one was getting heavy. About 6 weeks in, David's ex-wife called him. They hadn't spoken in months, not since the divorce was finalized. Her voice on the phone sounded different, softer. "I've been thinking," Jennifer said, "about us. About what went wrong. I think I gave up too easily." David's stomach dropped. "Jen, what are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe we made a mistake. Maybe we should try again." He sat in his car after that call for 20 minutes just staring at nothing. A year ago, he would have done anything to hear those words. He'd begged Jennifer to go to counseling to give their marriage another chance. She'd refused. Now here she was offering him exactly what he'd wanted, and all he could think about was Rebecca's laugh. The way she looked at him like he was someone worth knowing. He told Rebecca about the call the next time they met. "What do you want to do?" she asked, her face carefully neutral. "I don't want to go back," David said. "That part of my life is over." Rebecca smiled, but something in her eyes looked distant. "Good, because I don't share well." That same week, Rebecca got news too. The company was offering her a promotion. A big one, but it would mean moving to a different state, taking over the entire western region. "It's everything I've worked for," she told David over dinner at their usual spot, "but it would mean leaving in 3 months. 3 months, David repeated, the word sitting heavy in his chest. "Hey, we didn't make any promises, remember?" Rebecca reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Let's just enjoy what we have while we have it." But David was starting to realize he wanted more than just enjoying the moment. He was falling in love with her, had probably been falling since that first night, and he had no idea how she really felt about him. She'd tell him she cared about him, that she loved spending time with him, but she never wanted to talk about the future. Whenever he tried to have a serious conversation about where they were heading, she'd change the subject or kiss him to distract him. Things got more complicated when people at work started noticing something. Nothing obvious, but little comments here and there. Someone mentioned seeing David's car at the coffee shop near Rebecca's apartment. Another person joked about how they both seemed to be in good moods lately. David started to feel paranoid. He'd catch coworkers looking at him strangely. Was he being obvious? Could people tell? Then came the company celebration dinner, a fancy event for landing a major client. Everyone had to attend. David and Rebecca arrived separately, of course. They barely spoke to each other all night, keeping up the act. But then David saw something that made his blood run cold. Rebecca was talking to the client, a man named Richard from California. And she was flirting. Not just being friendly, but actually flirting. Laughing at his jokes, touching his arm, leaning in close. David felt sick. He left the party early, went home, and waited for her to call. She didn't. The next morning, he texted her. "We need to talk." They met in the parking garage after work. David didn't waste time. "What was that last night?" "With that guy Richard?" Rebecca frowned. "What are you talking about?" "I was networking. That's literally my job." "That wasn't networking." "You were all over him." "David, come on. Don't be like this." "Be like what? Someone who cares that the person they're with is flirting with other people?" Rebecca's face went cold. "The person they're with? We never defined what this is. I never promised you exclusivity." David felt like the ground had disappeared under his feet. "What? Look, I like you. I like what we have. But I never said I wasn't seeing other people." "You assume that." The parking garage suddenly felt too small, the air too thick. "You're seeing other people?" "I'm keeping my options open. Like we agreed. No pressure, no labels, remember? I thought that meant we were taking it slow, not that you were dating other guys." Rebecca crossed her arms. "I was honest from the start about what I wanted. I don't do traditional relationships. They don't work for me. I've tried and I always end up feeling trapped." "So what am I to you?" David asked, hating how his voice shook. "You're someone I care about, someone I enjoy spending time with. But I can't be what you want me to be. I can't be someone's girlfriend who checks in and makes plans and talks about the future. That's not me." David leaned against his car, feeling exhausted. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "I thought you understood. I thought you were okay with keeping things casual." Rebecca's voice softened. "David, I'm not trying to hurt you. But I need you to accept me as I am. No expectations, no claims on each other. If you can't do that, then maybe we should end this now." David looked at her, really looked at her. Even now, even hurt and angry, he didn't want to walk away. What he felt for her was stronger than his pride. stronger than the pain of knowing he wasn't enough to make her want more. "I need time to think," he said finally. "Take all the time you need," Rebecca said. "But don't expect me to change. This is who I am." She left him standing there in the parking garage, alone with his thoughts. For the next 3 weeks, David wrestled with himself. His friends told him to walk away, that he was setting himself up for heartbreak. But they didn't understand. They hadn't felt what he felt when he was with her. They didn't know how alive she made him feel. He convinced himself he could handle it. He could share her. He could accept whatever pieces of her life she was willing to give him. It was better than nothing. He called her and told her he was in. On her terms. Whatever she needed. Rebecca sounded relieved. "Thank you for understanding. I promise what we have is special to me." They went back to their secret meetings, their stolen moments. David tried not to think about what she did when she wasn't with him. Tried not to imagine her with someone else. Then, 3 weeks later, David was driving home late from visiting a friend. He took a different route than usual, cutting through a neighborhood he rarely went to. And there, parked outside an apartment building, was Rebecca's car. He recognized it immediately. The small dent in the back bumper, the parking pass hanging from the mirror. He checked the time. 2 a.m. David sat there for 10 minutes just staring at that car, knowing exactly what it meant, knowing he'd been fooling himself all along. Finally, he drove home. But he didn't sleep that night. He just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how much more of himself he was willing to lose. David didn't confront Rebecca right away. He couldn't. Every time he thought about what to say, the words got stuck in his throat. But he also couldn't pretend he hadn't seen her car parked outside someone else's place at 2 a.m. The next few days at work were torture. He'd see Rebecca in the hallway, and she'd smile at him like everything was normal, like she hadn't been somewhere else with someone else just nights before. David smiled back, but it felt like his face might crack from the effort. Finally, on Friday evening, he texted her. "Can we talk? Tonight?" They met at their usual spot, the parking garage, after hours. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. "What's wrong?" Rebecca asked, leaning against her car. "You've been weird all week." David took a breath. "Tuesday night, I saw your car, outside an apartment on Maple Street. At 2 a.m. Rebecca's expression didn't change. She didn't look guilty or caught. She just looked tired. And? That's all you have to say? "David, we talked about this. I told you I'm not exclusive with anyone. I was honest about that." "You were honest about being vague," David shot back. "You never actually said you were sleeping with other people." "I shouldn't have to spell out every detail. We're adults. You knew what this was." "No, I knew what I hoped it was. I knew what it felt like when we were together. And it didn't feel like something casual. It felt real." Rebecca pushed off from her car, frustration flashing across her face. "This is exactly why I don't do relationships. People always want more than I can give. They always think they can change me, or that I'll suddenly wake up and want a white picket fence and Sunday dinners. I don't want to change you. I just want to matter to you." "You do matter to me," Rebecca said, her voice softening slightly. "But I can't be what you need. I can't be someone who belongs to just one person. I've tried it before, and it destroyed me." David felt something shift in his chest. "What do you mean?" Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I was engaged once. 6 years ago. His name was Tom. We had the whole future planned out. Wedding date picked, apartment lease signed, everything." She stopped, swallowing hard. 3 months before the wedding, he was in a car accident. He died instantly. David felt his anger drain away, replaced by something heavier. "Rebecca, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Nobody knows. I don't talk about it." She crossed her arms, hugging herself. "After he died, I couldn't breathe. Every plan we'd made felt like a weight crushing me. I promised myself I'd never let myself need someone that much again. Never let anyone have that kind of power over me. So you keep everyone at a distance. So I protect myself. And I protect other people from getting too attached to me, because I will disappoint them. I always do." David wanted to reach for her to tell her she was wrong. But the look in her eyes stopped him. She believed what she was saying. She truly believed she was incapable of the kind of love he wanted. "I can't do this anymore," David said quietly. "I thought I could handle sharing you. But I can't, it's killing me." Rebecca nodded slowly. "I understand. I'm sorry I couldn't be what you needed. I'm sorry too, David said. They stood there for another moment, the buzzing lights filling the silence. Then Rebecca got in her car and drove away. David watched her taillights disappear down the ramp, and it felt like watching a part of himself leave. The next few weeks were brutal. David threw himself into work, staying late at the office until he was too exhausted to think. But he couldn't avoid Rebecca completely. They worked in the same building. They had some of the same meetings. Every time he saw her, it was like picking at a wound that wouldn't heal. She looked fine, maybe even happy. Meanwhile, David felt like he was walking around with a hole in his chest. His work started suffering. He missed a deadline for the first time in his career. Then he made an error in a presentation that cost the company a potential client. His boss called him in for a meeting. "David, what's going on? This isn't like you, I'm sorry. I've just been distracted. It won't happen again." But it did happen again. His performance review at the end of the quarter was the worst he'd ever received. The words "failing to meet expectations" felt like a punch to the gut. His friends noticed too. His best friend Kyle invited him out for drinks one Thursday night. "You look terrible, man," Kyle said, sliding a beer across the table. "When's the last time you slept?" "I sleep," David lied. "You need to talk about whatever this is." "Is it about your ex-wife?" "Because Jennifer's not worth this." "It's not Jennifer." Kyle raised an eyebrow. "So there's someone else?" David took a long drink of his beer. "There was." "It's over now. Want to talk about it?" David found himself telling Kyle everything. About meeting Rebecca, about the months of secrecy, about how it all fell apart. Kyle listened without interrupting. When David finished, Kyle let out a low whistle. "That's rough. But honestly, it sounds like you dodged a bullet. Someone who won't commit, who sees other people. That's not someone you build a life with." David knew Kyle was right. Logically, he knew it. But logic didn't make his heart hurt any less. Kyle set up some dates for him. A friend of a friend, then a coworker's sister. David went through the motions. The women were nice enough. Pretty smart, successful. But they weren't Rebecca. Nobody was Rebecca. One night, scrolling through social media, David saw photos of Rebecca on a beach somewhere tropical. She was laughing, holding a drink with an umbrella in it, the sunset golden behind her. She looked free, happy, like she hadn't lost anything at all. David closed the app and threw his phone on the couch. He sat there in his dark apartment, wondering when he'd feel normal again. Wondering if he'd ever stop missing someone who'd never really been his to begin with. 2 months after their breakup, David was grabbing coffee at a shop near the office. He was waiting for his order when someone tapped him on the shoulder. He turned to find a woman about his age with kind eyes and a gentle smile. "David, I'm sorry to bother you. I'm Lisa. I'm Rebecca's best friend." David's stomach dropped. "Oh, hi. Can we talk for a minute?" "Please?" They sat at a corner table. Lisa wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, looking uncomfortable. "I probably shouldn't be doing this," she said. "Rebecca would kill me if she knew. But I can't stand watching her do this to herself anymore." "Do what?" "Pretend she's okay." "She's not okay, David. She's miserable. Has been since you two broke up." David blinked. "She looks happy. I saw her photos from vacation. Social media isn't real life. You know that?" Lisa leaned forward. "Look, Rebecca puts on a good show. She's been doing it for years. But I've known her since college. I can see through it. Why are you telling me this?" Lisa hesitated. "Because I think you need to understand why she is the way she is. She told you about Tom, right? Her fiancé who died?" David nodded. "She didn't tell you everything. When Tom died, Rebecca was driving the car. They were on their way to look at wedding venues. A truck ran a red light and hit the passenger side. Tom was killed instantly. Rebecca walked away with minor injuries." David felt his chest tighten. "Oh God, she's carried that guilt for 6 years. She's convinced herself that if she hadn't insisted they go that day, if she'd taken a different route, if she'd left 5 minutes later, he'd still be alive. And she's convinced herself that she doesn't deserve to love someone or be loved again. She never told me any of that. She doesn't tell anyone, but that's why she pushes people away. That's why she sabotages anything real before it can become something she might lose." Lisa looked directly at David. "I saw how she was when you two were together. She was different, lighter, but then she got scared." David ran his hand through his hair. "What am I supposed to do with this information?" "I don't know." "Maybe nothing. Maybe it doesn't change anything. But I thought you deserved to understand. She's not cold or incapable of love. She's just terrified. Lisa stood up to leave, then paused. For what it's worth. I think you were good for her. Maybe the best thing that's happened to her in years. After she left, David sat there for a long time, his coffee going cold. Everything suddenly made sense. Rebecca's need for control, her refusal to commit, the way she'd look at him sometimes like she wanted to say something but couldn't. She wasn't protecting herself from love. She was protecting herself from loss. And in doing so, she was guaranteeing her own loneliness. David pulled out his phone and opened a new note. He started typing, the words flowing faster than he could think them through. He wrote about understanding and forgiveness, about being brave enough to try again even when you're scared, about how love was always a risk, but some risks were worth taking. When he was done, he read it over 3 times. Then he printed it at the office, folded it carefully, and left it on Rebecca's desk after everyone had gone home. He didn't expect her to respond, didn't expect anything to change. But 3 days later at 11:47 at night, someone knocked on his door. David stared at his apartment door, his heart hammering in his chest. The knock came again, softer this time. He opened the door and there she was. Rebecca stood in the hallway, still wearing her work clothes, mascara smudged under her eyes like she'd been crying. She held his letter in her hand, the paper wrinkled like she'd read it 100 times. "Can I come in?" Her voice was barely a whisper. David stepped aside and she walked past him into the apartment. She stood in the middle of his living room looking lost. He'd never seen her look uncertain before. She was always so confident, so sure of everything. "I got your letter," she said, still not looking at him. "I know. I can see it. Lisa told you. About the accident. About Tom. It wasn't a question. She thought I should know. She thought it would help me understand." Rebecca finally turned to face him, and the pain in her eyes nearly broke him. "I've been sitting in my car outside for 20 minutes trying to decide if I should knock. Part of me wanted to just drive away and pretend I never read this." "Why didn't you?" "Because everything you wrote was true. Every single word." A tear slid down her cheek. "I have been running. From you, from myself, from anything that might actually make me happy. Because happy things can be taken away. I learned that the hard way." David wanted to go to her, but he stayed where he was. "Tell me about that day. The accident." Rebecca wrapped her arms around herself. "It was a Saturday morning. Beautiful day, not a cloud in the sky. Tom wanted to wait until the next weekend to look at venues, but I insisted. I was so excited about the wedding I couldn't wait." Her voice cracked. "If I'd just listened to him, he'd still be alive. You don't know that. I was driving, David. I was the one behind the wheel. I saw the truck coming, but it was too fast. I couldn't do anything. The sound of the impact, the glass breaking, Tom's hand going limp in mine while I screamed for help." She was crying now, really crying. "I killed the person I loved most in the world. It was an accident. A truck ran a red light. That wasn't your fault. Everyone keeps saying that. The police said it. The therapist said it. But I can't stop thinking about all the little choices that led to that moment. If I'd driven slower, faster, taken a different street. If I'd just listened when he said we should wait." David couldn't stay away anymore. He crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. She resisted for a second, then collapsed against him, sobbing into his chest. "I'm so scared," she whispered between sobs. "I'm scared of feeling this way about you. I'm scared something will happen and I'll lose you too. I'm scared of being happy because I don't think I deserve it." David held her tighter. "You do deserve it. What happened to Tom was a tragedy, but it wasn't your fault. And you can't spend the rest of your life punishing yourself for surviving." They stood there for a long time, Rebecca crying while David just held her. Finally, her tears slowed. She pulled back, wiping her face with her sleeve. "I don't know how to do this," she said. "A real relationship. I've been avoiding it for so long I don't even know where to start. We start with honesty. Complete honesty. No more walls, no more running. We talk about things even when they're hard." Rebecca nodded slowly. "I want to try. I'm terrified, but I want to try. With you." They talked until the sun came up. Really talked about everything. Rebecca told him about the therapy she'd quit after 6 months because it was too painful. About the guilt that woke her up at 3 in the morning. About how seeing David happy had made her realize what she was missing by keeping everyone at arm's length. David told her about his divorce, about feeling like he'd failed at the one thing that was supposed to last forever. About being afraid to open his heart again, but doing it anyway because she made him feel alive in a way he'd forgotten was possible. "I can't promise I won't get scared and want to run," Rebecca said, as dawn light filtered through the windows. "That's still my instinct? Then we'll work through it together. But you have to promise me one thing. If you get scared, you talk to me instead of disappearing. Deal?" Deal. They decided to do it right this time. They told HR about their relationship, facing the uncomfortable meetings and paperwork together. They went public at work, enduring the gossip and whispers. Rebecca's hand in his during a team meeting spoke louder than any announcement could have. For 6 months, it was everything David had hoped for. They spent weekends exploring the city, cooking dinner together in his apartment, talking about books and movies and dreams. Rebecca met his daughter from his previous marriage, and they got along surprisingly well. David met Rebecca's family, her parents and younger brother. Over Sunday dinner, her mom pulled him aside in the kitchen. "I haven't seen her this happy in years," she said, squeezing his hand. "Thank you for being patient with her. Life felt good. Better than good." David started to believe they'd actually made it through the hard part. Then Rebecca got the call about the promotion. The big one she'd been working toward for years. Regional director of the Western Division, 6-figure salary, her own team. Everything she'd sacrificed for. There was just one catch. The position was in Seattle, 2,000 miles away. She came to his apartment that night, and David knew something was wrong the moment he saw her face. "They approved my promotion," she said, standing in his doorway. "That's amazing. I'm so proud of you." "David, it's in Seattle. I have to move in 3 months." The words hit him like cold water. 3 months. They sat on his couch, the TV playing some show neither of them was watching. "Come with me," Rebecca said. "Move to Seattle. We can do this together." David wanted to say yes. Every part of him wanted to say yes. But there was something he hadn't told her yet. Something that made everything more complicated. "I can't," he said quietly. "My daughter Katie. She lives here with Jennifer. I have her every other weekend and Wednesday nights. If I move across the country, I'll hardly ever see her." Rebecca's face fell. "I didn't think about that." "Neither did I. I guess I thought we had more time before we had to figure this stuff out." They spent the next few weeks trying to find solutions. Maybe Rebecca could commute back every other weekend. Maybe David could fly to Seattle when he didn't have Katie. Maybe they could make long-distance work. But the more they talked about it, the more impossible it seemed. The distance wasn't just physical. It represented all the ways their lives didn't quite fit together. The stress started showing. Little arguments over nothing. Silences that felt heavy. David could see Rebecca pulling back, that old familiar distance creeping back into her eyes. One night they had their worst fight yet. Rebecca accused David of not being willing to sacrifice for their relationship. David accused Rebecca of looking for an excuse to run. "That's not fair," Rebecca said, her voice shaking with anger. "I'm finally letting myself be vulnerable with someone and you're throwing it in my face." "I'm not throwing anything. I'm just being realistic. One of us has to give up something huge, and neither of us knows if this relationship will even last." The words hung in the air between them. "Neither of us knows if this will last." "Is that what you really think?" Rebecca asked quietly. "That we won't last?" David ran his hands through his hair, exhausted. "I don't know what I think anymore. I know I love you, but maybe that's not enough." Rebecca stood up, grabbing her jacket. "Maybe you're right. Maybe we're just fooling ourselves, thinking we can make this work when our lives are pulling us in different directions." "Where are you going?" "Home, I need to think." She left without kissing him goodbye. David sat alone in his apartment, wondering if they'd just ended things without actually saying the words. 3 weeks before Rebecca was supposed to move, she stopped answering his calls. She wasn't at work, and her assistant said she'd taken some personal days. David's text went unanswered. He was sitting at his desk staring at his phone when his ex-wife called. "David, we need to talk," Jennifer said. "It's about Katie." His stomach dropped. "Is she okay?" "She's fine. But Robert and I have some news." Robert was Jennifer's fiancé. He got a job offer in Boston. A really good one. "We're planning to move next month." David felt the room spin. "You're taking Katie to Boston?" "I have primary custody. I'm legally allowed to relocate, but that means I'll barely see her." "I know. I'm sorry, but this is what's best for our family." After Jennifer hung up, David sat in his office for a long time. The one thing keeping him tied to this city was about to disappear, and he'd pushed away the one person he wanted to build a future with. David sat frozen at his desk, Jennifer's words echoing in his head. Katie was moving to Boston next month. The one anchor keeping him in this city was being pulled away, and there was nothing he could do about it. He picked up his phone and called Rebecca. It went straight to voicemail. He tried again. Same thing. For 3 days, David wrestled with what to do. His daughter was leaving. Rebecca was leaving. His entire life was falling apart, and he felt powerless to stop any of it. On the 4th day, he drove to Rebecca's apartment and knocked on the door. No answer. He knocked again, louder this time. "She's not there," a voice said behind him. It was Rebecca's neighbor, an elderly woman walking her small dog. "Haven't seen her in days. I think she went to stay with family." David thanked her and walked back to his car. He sat there in the parking lot staring at Rebecca's dark windows. He'd lost her, really lost her this time. And the worst part was knowing it was partly his fault. That night, David couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about everything that had happened. How he'd let fear control his choices. How he'd used his daughter as an excuse when the truth was simpler and scarier. He was terrified of taking the leap. Terrified of choosing Rebecca and having it not work out. But now Katie was leaving anyway. And he'd pushed Rebecca away for nothing. The next morning, David made a decision. He called his boss and requested a meeting. 2 hours later, he walked out of that office with approval to work remotely from Seattle. The company had been moving toward remote work anyway. His boss actually seemed relieved David was willing to relocate to the West Coast. Then he called Jennifer. "I need to talk to you about Katie, about me moving to Boston to be closer to her." "David, that's not necessary. We can work out a visitation schedule. I know I can't stop you from moving, but I don't want to be one of those dads who only sees his kid twice a year. I want to be part of her life." There was a long pause. Then Jennifer said something that surprised him. "Actually, Robert and I talked about this. We feel terrible taking Katie so far away. What if we looked for places in Seattle instead? Robert has contacts there too. It's closer to his family anyway." David's heart stopped. "Seattle? We hadn't mentioned it because we didn't think you'd care where we moved. But if you're open to relocating too, maybe it makes sense. Katie could still see you regularly. What do you think?" David almost laughed. The universe was basically screaming at him to go to Seattle. "I think that sounds perfect." After he hung up, David sat in his car with a huge smile on his face. Everything had just clicked into place. But there was still one problem. Rebecca had stopped talking to him, and she was leaving in 2 weeks. He tried calling again. Voicemail. He sent a text. "Please call me. I have something important to tell you." No response. David knew he had to find her. He called Lisa, Rebecca's best friend. "She's at her parents' house," Lisa said, "about 3 hours north." "But David, I don't know if she wants to see you. She's pretty hurt, I know, but I need to tell her something. Something that changes everything." Lisa was quiet for a moment. "Okay, I'll text you the address. But if she sends you away, you have to respect that." "I will. I promise." David got in his car and started driving. 3 hours felt like forever. He rehearsed what he wanted to say 100 different ways. None of them felt right. When he finally pulled up to a small house with a bright red door, his hands were shaking. He sat in the car for a full minute, gathering courage. Then he walked up to the door and knocked. Rebecca's mother answered. She looked surprised to see him. "David, what are you doing here?" "I need to talk to Rebecca, please, it's important." Her mother studied his face, then nodded. "She's out back, in the garden." David walked through the house and out the back door. Rebecca was sitting on a wooden bench under a large oak tree, a book in her lap. She looked up when she heard the door and her eyes went wide. "What are you doing here? Your phone's been off." "I needed to see you." Rebecca stood up, crossing her arms. "I needed space, David, time to think. I know. And I'm sorry for showing up like this, but I couldn't let you leave without telling you something." "What?" David took a breath. "Katie's moving. Jennifer and her fiancé are relocating. They were going to go to Boston, but now they're thinking Seattle, to be closer to his family." Rebecca's expression didn't change. "That's good for you, I guess. You don't understand. The whole reason I couldn't come with you was because of Katie. But now she's moving anyway. And I talked to my boss. I can work remotely. From anywhere." Rebecca's arms slowly dropped to her sides. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to come with you. To Seattle. I want to build a life with you there. If you still want that. If I haven't ruined everything. David, you can't make a decision this big just because circumstances changed. What about your job? Your life here? My job is portable. And my life here? David stepped closer. The only thing that made it feel like home was you. Without you, it's just a place where I sleep. Rebecca shook her head, and David could see tears forming in her eyes. You said we might not last. You said maybe love wasn't enough. I was wrong. I was scared. I've been scared this whole time, just like you. Scared of choosing you and having it fall apart. Scared of being hurt again. So I used Katie as an excuse, a reason to stay safe. David reached for her hands. But the truth is, I'd rather take the risk with you than spend the rest of my life wondering what could have been. A tear rolled down Rebecca's cheek. I was going to turn down the promotion. What? That's why I've been here. I've been trying to figure out how to tell them I'm not taking it, because the thought of being 2,000 miles away from you was worse than giving up my dream job. David pulled her into his arms. You're not giving up anything. We're both going. Together. Rebecca pulled back to look at him. Are you sure? Really sure? Because I need to know you're not going to resent me if things get hard. I'm sure. And things will get hard. We'll probably fight. We'll definitely make mistakes. But I'd rather figure it out together than be apart. Rebecca kissed him then. And it felt like coming home. 6 months later, David stood in their new apartment in Seattle. Boxes still half unpacked everywhere. The view from their window showed the city skyline and, in the distance, mountains. It hadn't been easy. David missed his old friends. His daughter was adjusting to a new school and sometimes blamed him for the move, even though it wasn't his fault. His remote work setup had technical problems. And Rebecca's new job was more demanding than she'd expected. They'd had fights. Real ones. About money and space and whose turn it was to do dishes. About Rebecca working too late and David forgetting to pick up groceries. About all the small, stupid things that couples fight about. But they'd also learned to talk through things. To say when they were scared instead of running away. To ask for help when they needed it. David had started seeing a therapist to work through his fear of abandonment. Rebecca had gone back to therapy too, finally dealing with the guilt she'd carried for years about the accident. They were both doing the hard work of becoming better versions of themselves. Katie came over every other weekend now. She and Rebecca had bonded over their shared love of cooking. Last Sunday, they'd made cookies together while David watched, amazed at how natural it all felt. On a quiet Saturday morning, David woke up to find Rebecca already awake, standing by the window. The morning sun lit up her hair and she was smiling at something outside. What are you looking at? David asked, walking over to join her. Just the city, our city, she turned to him. You know what's weird? I spent so many years running from happiness, convinced I didn't deserve it. And now here I am and I'm not scared anymore. Not even a little? Okay, maybe a little. But it's the good kind of scared. The kind that means you have something worth losing. David wrapped his arms around her from behind. We're not going to lose this. How do you know? Because we both chose it. Every day we keep choosing it. That's what makes it real. Rebecca turned in his arms and looked up at him. Then she stepped away and walked to the window. She reached up and pulled the curtains closed, blocking out the bright morning sun. She turned back to face him and there was that smile. The same smile from that first night in the hotel room. But it was different now. No trouble in it, no fear or walls or distance, just love and peace, and the promise of whatever came next. So, Rebecca said, that smile growing wider. Ready to figure out what we're doing today? David laughed and pulled her close. With you? Always. He thought about that moment in the hotel almost 2 years ago now, when she'd closed those curtains and smiled at him like trouble. He'd known even then that she would change his life. He'd been terrified of it, standing here now in their apartment in a new city, building a life together one messy, beautiful day at a time. David understood something important. Sometimes the scariest decisions lead to the best outcomes. Sometimes the person who looks like trouble is actually the one who helps you find yourself. And sometimes love isn't about perfect circumstances or easy choices. It's about choosing each other, again and again, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Rebecca rested her head against his chest, and David could feel her heartbeat matching his own rhythm. I love you, she whispered. I love you too. And in that moment, with the curtains closed and the world shut out, everything felt exactly right. Not perfect. Real life was never perfect. But right. True. Theirs. David had spent so long playing it safe, building walls, protecting himself from getting hurt. And then one night, a woman with a trouble-promising smile had knocked all those walls down. Best decision he never knew he was making. Outside, the city hummed with life. People rushing to work, living their own stories. But inside this apartment, time felt slow and sweet. You know what? Rebecca said, looking up at him. What? I'm really glad you followed me that night. To the diner. Me too. And I'm glad you didn't give up on me, even when I gave you every reason to. David kissed her forehead. I couldn't give up on you. You were worth fighting for. They stood there for a while longer, just holding each other. No need for words. This was it. This was what he'd been missing all those years. Not perfection, not safety, but this. Someone to face the uncertainty with. Someone to choose and be chosen by every single day. The curtains stayed closed. The coffee could wait. The unpacked boxes could wait. Everything could wait. For now, this was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The end.